I loved 99% of My Son. And unfortunately, that 1% kind of ruined an otherwise pretty enjoyable experience. Now, because that 1% is relating to the conclusion of the film, I'm not going to spoil it. I will maybe towards the end give a spoiler warning and discuss it, but for the most part, this will be spoiler free. So the film was released in 2021, directed by Christian Carion and written by Carion and Laure Irrmann. And this stars the fabulous James McAvoy and Claire Foy. And this is about a little boy who has gone missing, and this little 7-year-old boy, and he's living with his mother, Joan, played by Claire Foy, and his mother's partner, stepfather, if you like. And his father, Edmond, played by James McAvoy, is actually away all of the time. He travels internationally for work, potentially has quite a dangerous job. He comes back to the Highlands in Scotland when he finds out that his son is missing, and obviously joins the search. There are questions about whether or not his potentially high-risk job has something to do with a potential abduction of this child. They don't know whether he has been abducted, if he has perhaps wandered off somewhere. They are doing searches, obviously, everywhere. Because this is set in the Highlands, it's... First of all, the Scottish accents are everywhere, which for me, being Scottish, not a problem, but it's worth pointing out. That the accents aren't very Highlands. To be honest, the accents are pretty tame. But if you do, for whatever reason, struggle to understand the Scots accent, I think you'll be all right with it. It's not as strong as one would expect for the Highlands. But as the narrative progresses, basically, Edmond, James McAvoy, the boy's son, becomes more and more frustrated, and is basically, from his perspective for the most part, as he begins to basically lose his temper constantly at everybody, trying to find out what happens to his son. And there's a little bit of investigation, and then he maybe thinks he's got a lead. He follows that lead. Will it take him to the right place? I'm not going to say what happens, but it's a mystery, but I guess it is a bit of a mystery, but it's a detective story without a detective. We do actually have Inspector Roy, played by Gary Lewis, who I think is brilliant. He's in it a really pleasing amount, actually. Usually with this kind of thing, you'll see the inspector or the sergeant, like, fleetingly, and then never again. But he's in it and has quite a lot of interaction with Edmond, which makes this a little bit more believable. We have various suspects. I'm not going to say who they are, because I don't want to kind of put you on the scent before you watch it. But I was gripped. I didn't know what happened. I didn't work it out. There are some pretty horrific scenes. There's one scene where Edmond is definitely at the end of his tether. It's a bit of a torture scene, and it's one of the most realistic responses to a parent finding out a bit of information that could lead them closer to the truth. It's hard to watch, but given Edmond's character, I believed his response. I felt McAvoy's performance was exactly what I would expect from a parent in this situation. It's also important to note that he feels guilty because he does spend so much time away and doesn't really get to see his son that much. So he's obviously feeling quite a bit of guilt about there as well. It is incredible. For the most part, it's beautiful. With it being set in the Highlands, it's pouring with rain pretty much the entire time. It's very muddy, it's dirty, it's very atmospheric. And that all works really well. Would I recommend it? This is where it gets tricky. I would recommend it on the basis that we have some fantastic acting, brilliant performances, really good pacing with the narrative, but towards the end, and I will explain this with a spoiler warning, but towards the end, it just gets messy and lazy, and I will explain again in a minute with a spoiler warning what I mean by this, but it's kind of like somebody discarded several pages of the script at the end. There are so many unanswered questions and so many things that needed to be answered. And it's not like it's not like interpretive. There are things that have happened, and then there are just missing pages. So either they got very lazy and rushed the ending, or somebody accidentally deleted 10 minutes of footage before they rendered the final version. So I would recommend it if you like this kind of thing, but just be aware that you probably won't be satisfied with the ending. But if you watch it and you do enjoy the ending, please let me know. I'd love to know if you have a different perspective on that. Okay, so spoiler warning. Spoilers from now. The ending. It started to go downhill once he actually went into the house, and I realised at this point that it was too dark. By which I mean the lighting was appalling. I couldn't really see what was going on, and not in an atmospheric way where I could feel the heightened intensity and not knowing what was around the corner. I just genuinely struggled to see what was on the screen. And, you know, my screen is not poorly lit. I was watching it on Amazon Prime, it's a really good copy. And I just felt like it was too dark visually. In terms of the atmosphere, it was dark in other ways as well. But because I was struggling to see what was going on and who was chasing whom and who was on the phone to whom, it made it quite not hard to follow as such, but just really uninteresting. And then the episode with the car I thought was really poorly edited. And then Joan's involvement there just didn't really make a lot of sense to me in terms of the timing coincidences. And then obviously it cuts to what is actually a really beautiful moment when they're on the field with the drone or whatever it is. But it's like, well, what happened? There was a collision and he hit his head on the steering wheel or whatever, and then there was a gap. And what happened? What happened to people? Where were the other children? So many questions that I didn't have an answer to. And part of me kind of wanted to know what the judge would have said to Edmond and whether or not he'd be let off for obviously certain things that he did. That bit of it, I think, can be left to interpretation. That's okay. But it's the stuff that should have came directly before that. It just feels like the writers couldn't be bothered coming up with answers. Or, as I said, they lost the pages or they deleted the bit of the edit that they needed. I don't know. But it did not satisfy me. It didn't really answer a lot of questions. And that's kind of imperative with this sort of mystery detective crime drama. So I would recommend it. I'm hoping you've already seen it by now since I've spoiled the ending, or what is possible to spoil of the ending. I would recommend it, but it definitely could have been better. It kind of let itself down at the 11th hour.